To think we are finally at the stage where I'm doing the art design for my game. Finally happening after more than 2 years working on this game. I have never been more excited to take on the next step for a game. So I'm going to be showing you a giant art design document that I created with about hundreds of pages to see, although lots of it are images for references. So rather than walking through the entire document, which would take like 12 hours, I'll go over the general structure of my art design document. Oh, and also Patreon and Ko-fi. Check that out, there's free posts about my game. Anyways, let's dive into the art design. Let's start at the overall structure of the design document. I'm using Google Documents for my document, and it has a feature where you can do tabs for one document, as you can see here on the left. And I split up all the major categories into these tabs. Some tabs are very short, like 1 page, while other tabs are very long, almost up to 70 pages. So let's go through these tabs one by one. So let's start with the main theme tab. This goes over the overall theme of the game, the premise, and the graphics, as well as the color scheming of the game. I plan to have the graphics be a low polygon chibi style for the placeables and villagers, as you can see in these references. Now, you may notice some ChatGPT concept art, but do not be alarmed. Oh, everyone calm down, calm down. This is not a huge deal. Let me explain. Alright, now that I have your attention. So I use it for quick mock-ups, and it helps with the fact that I'm not an artist too. It also helps with being a good visualizer. Oftentimes there's parts of concept art that I don't catch, that I should have thought of previously. Of course, this will be seen often later on in my art design documents. But don't worry, these concept arts, they won't be the final result of the model endgame. So do not be afraid. Now for the dragon tab, here I'll get into the general structure of how I approach the art design for each and every aspect of my game. So here I go for the looks of the dragon, finding attributes associated with the dragon, what works, what doesn't, and of course, concept art for the dragon. So my strategy here is I take pieces from what I like and don't like from each concept art, and any possible changes that I want. There's also a section for animation, currently not addressed, as this is something I'm saving for until I get the modeling and texturing. Then there's a section of the projectile, which for the dragon would be the fireball. There's lots of references that I'm using here. It's not all just ChatGPT concept art. I take some real-life references, some other concept art from real artists, and you may notice that I keep a link under these images. This is just so I know where I got it from, just in case. It also makes it easy if I want to download these images, as Google Docs does not allow downloading images from the get-go. So here you can see that I'm quite detailed with the fireball, going into every aspect of it. The impact, the VFX, the critical shot, so on. However, later on, you won't see that much detail for later projectiles. You'll see what I mean. Now here is the Placeables and Villagers tab. As you can see, it's very empty. There's only 2 sentences on this thing. And it probably will stay like that because I did not find too many similarities between these guys for art design anyway. And now we get into the real meat of it, the Placeables tab. So this is one of the tabs with the several pages, up to 64 if I remember, 57 actually. And so for the beginning section of this tab, I go over important ideas that apply to all Placeables. For example, the team logo. I'm trying to go for a Dragon Talons team logo. Very beautifully drawn, as you can see. Not everything is AI. Judging by my drawing skills, I wonder if we should. No, I'm just kidding. Now let's jump to a placeable to show you the general layout. Let's go for the Ice Mage here. So you can see here that I start with the character concept, finding references that I like to associate with the placeable. Like the dragon section, I point out what I like and I would want to change. I also put in the image references in ChatGPT. Now, something to note, for anyone out there that wants to use ChatGPT as a tool, just know that it's never consistent with what you ask from it. So it goes to show that it shouldn't be a replacer for anyone, just strictly used as a tool. Then I get into the weapons section, talking about what this placeable will be wielding. And I usually have a pretty good idea as to what I want from this placeable. In this case, I actually have two choices that I left to my future self. Here I say she will either hold a tome of ice spells in her left hand, or she's just going to cast ice spells on both hands. In other words, she won't be holding anything. Next, I cover the projectile that they'll be shooting. As you can see, I don't go into too much detail compared to the dragon section. I just try to get my point across as to what I'm looking for. In this case, an icicle projectile. Next, I cover the VFX, and this would apply to both the projectile and the placeable, if applicable. And of course, there's an animation section, but like I said previously, until I have a model, I'll have a pretty good idea by then as to what I want those animations to look like. Now, something that I want to point out here are the traps for placeables. So let's go to the spike trap here. They are structured in a shorter manner compared to the sentience. As you can see here, I just have the trap concept, any possible VFX, any possible animations, and that's it. Nothing too complicated for traps. Now the villager tab is a pretty similar structure as placeables. The beginning sections go over important ideas that would apply to all villagers. And then if we take a look at one villager, let's go with the shinobi for instance, it'll have similar structure as the placeables. You can see here the character concept, the weapon, projectile, VFX. You get the gist of it. Now the one villager that really stands out is the king, which is the final boss of the game. Of course I have the usual sections, but there is an addition, which is the minions that carries the king into the battlefield. You can see that I go into the minions' weapons, their projectile, and most importantly, I go into the boss stages of the king. So for the environment tab, I decided upon myself to do a deep dive into what worked and what didn't work. And man, there was a lot of wrongs with it, that's for sure. But I challenged myself to also find some good, what worked. It wasn't much, but it existed. I decided to challenge ChatGPT to see if it spotted anything that I haven't said yet, as I lack background of environment design. But it basically said what I was saying, but in a more clear manner. Most importantly, what it pointed out was the grass, which was that it was way too noisy, and it was blending together all the projectiles and entities. There's just too much going on here. And after the analysis, I talked about the layout of the battlefield, talked about the design of the castle, behind the castle, possible camera effects, and that's about it. For the UI section, the plan structure is a little different compared to the rest of the tabs. One similarity, though, is at the beginning, you have your most important stuff that applies to everything, like the main UI aesthetic and the common UI elements. As you can see, I go over the common backgrounds, common buttons, common scroll bar, and what I meant with this section is that it applies to wherever necessary, unless I say otherwise. Now, with the structure of a specific UI design, let's say for the main menu, I go over the wireframe, the art design, and then animation. The wireframe is just a general layout of the UI. The art design is of course used for references, and the animation is any fancy movement that I need for the UI, such as when it's being spawned in or destroyed. Now there are other sections that differ from this structure, such as the dragon upgrade icons. For this, I just do a quick draft of the icon I'm trying to go for. It lets me get a feel for the general idea that I want to go for in my polished version. Then at the very end of this tab is the text font. Now this is something that is scary for me because this text font is going to show up everywhere in the game. And if the text font doesn't quite fit the aesthetic, it will end up being hard to look at. But I could also just be overestimating text in UI. Now the miscellaneous tab is where things that don't really belong to any other tabs go. Now this is a pretty small tab. I go over the soul gaining animation and the craters. And to be honest, looking back at this could have been moved to the UI and villagers tab respectively. But, it's whatever. Lastly, we have the Great Sources tab. And this is just where I hold links for any references that could be useful to me. As you can see here, I have a few VFX links and references of armor back in the day, 15th century specifically. And that's all there is to it, folks. That is my approach to art design. Creating a giant document for honestly not that big of a game, all things considered. I mean, imagine doing this for a giant scaled game, then there would be hundreds upon hundreds of pages. I've tried researching if there was any templates to this sort of thing, but honestly, not really. There are similarities between art design documents I've found, but none are the exact same. So I picked out what made the most sense to me. But let me know how you guys approached art design, if you've done it before, in the comments. Oh, and Ko-fi Patreon upscare! How to catch you off guard. And with that, that's about it. I hope to see you guys in the next devlog.